Hi everyone, it's Saturday and we had a massive rain event last night, so everything is nice and moist. The soil feels spongy and it's still overcast, so I thought I used the good light for a bit of information on our hazel seedlings and unsuccessful stropharia mushroom cultivation. I'm at the bottom end of our plot, and this is the micro forest that borders our plot. We care for it, we plant new trees and thin out the dead and dying trees, but I'll talk more about that in another video. Right here at the border I left a 2-meter wide path, and I wanted to create another layer of the forest, so to say, with hazels. Maybe a 15-meter, like a hedge of hazels, not only for nut production but also for the wood, the coppiced stems. But I wanted to avoid buying the material from a nursery, because the previous 4 attempts with buying hazel seedlings, actually they were grafted hazel seedlings, they all failed. The plants died even though we watered them and mulched them. So in the end I decided to start experimenting with direct seeding, which is just gathering some hazelnuts and putting them in the soil. And the first several of those are, I'd say, very successful. Those few bushes, one here, there was another one here, which was, actually there were 2 smaller ones which were moved, I'll show you later. 2, 3, 4, 5 little bushes. Those all started from seed in different years. This is the biggest, which has multiple stems. The older ones are more than 2 centimeters in diameter, and those are last year. You can see that's easily 1.5 meters growth from a single root sucker in 1 year, which means that the plant is well established. So this is I think 5 or 6 year old seedling, and those are 3-year-old seedlings, and the one on that side I think is 4 or 5-year seedling, which also has a nice growth. Some breakfast for the hens and some more. So last autumn I dug out 2 very small plants which were maybe 2 or 3 years old from those 2 spots, and I put about 10 or 15 centimeters deep layer of straw mulch, and you can see that it's almost all gone now. We are down to the bare soil. There's almost no straw visible left. So the soil is very active. Those are some Jerusalem artichoke stems, which I also use as mulch here in hopes that they will compost slower. And the 2 plants Sadly, I couldn't dig out properly because their roots were very, very deep, as usually is the case with direct seeded plants. And I will show you how little they've developed this far. This is one of them. I removed the side stems, but even though I trimmed the main branches, they have developed very, very poorly. I attribute that to the loss of root mass, but this is a good sign. Two new shoots appearing from the base, and this is the other one. I have not trimmed around here recently, so the grass is tall, but that's not a problem. More moisture for the bushes, and I can see here that the jays planted a walnut. They are our main, the blue jays and the magpies, they're our main walnut propagators. So the idea here is to dig out some of those root suckers and plant those out in a hedge in that direction, so I can have like a solid wall of hazels. And 3 years ago I decided to use this well mulched space, which is also shady, and usually it's the spot in the garden with the most moisture, because the terrain slopes downhill and most of the water ends up subsurface by subsurface infiltration here. So I thought that it's a good spot for some mushrooms. And also I have a friend who already had some stropharia or wine cap, also known as garden giant mushrooms, in his garden. He approved of my selection of the spot. It's also shady, so not so much evaporation. And what I did was remove some of the mulch, got some of his substrate, which was wood chips. They were already inoculated and fruiting in his garden, and dug those in over here under the hazels, and then covered the whole thing with more straw as a mulch. And also I know that stropharia grows well in straw. So what happened was that in the first year there was no visible development, and in the second year there was a single fruiting body that appeared. And then we had 2 years of very, very dry and hot summers, so I couldn't find any trace of the stropharia mycelium. And then I took another batch from another friend of mine who ordered it from, I think, the Czech Republic, I'm not sure, and tried again. But this time the mycelium didn't develop at all. And so I consulted with some folks who grow mushrooms for a living online, and their verdict was that probably my soil was already rich in other mushrooms of mycelium of other species, and they were competing. And the stropharia prefers to be like the dominant species in the soil, so they were having a hard time. And indeed, here in the forest we have at least 4 species of mushrooms which appear in different times of the year. But anyway, I haven't given up completely, and this year I ordered some from the Netherlands, which came in a plastic sealed bag with sawdust. And I can't show you the back right now because I have unpacked it and split it with a friend, but I've moved my part of the substrate into this plastic tray from an old refrigerator and put some straw on top, and you can see that the mycelium is already colonizing the straw. You can see the white strands, and deeper down here is the original sawdust substrate mixed with the straw. I've kept this plastic tray covered with an old white burlap bag from ground coffee beans, and kept that in the basement where there is some moisture and a stable temperature. However, it doesn't get very warm even in summer, so I've decided it's time to take the whole thing out and try it again in this spot. So I'll dig just a bit of a surface to create like a simple bed, which I'll cover with this straw, and this is 3 or 4 year old wheat straw, and then I'll dump the pot inside, cover the whole thing with more straw, and that's it. We're expecting more rain today and tomorrow, and the ground is soggy from all the rain, so there won't be a problem with the moisture, and I'll follow the development of the mycelium. I hope with the higher temperature outside of the basement it will develop faster, and I'll let you know how it goes in another video, maybe in 2 months time. Two more little details I wanted to point your attention to when growing hazels from seedling in those in such wild conditions and not in some cultivated space. When the first stem of the seedling appears, oftentimes it doesn't grow tall and straight as later stems do, but starts to branch out early. Like for example, this is the original stem of the seedling, which branched out here very low, and each of the two branches started branching out and growing a bit bended and closer to the ground. And then the next year stems, you can see that they are already almost as thick as the original one. They grow much straighter, and this is last year's growth, this smaller stem. So my advice to you is to remove the first crooked stems, and I have neglected to do so here and also here. You can see that this stem terminated here and here on the first and the second year and didn't grow very much, and that one is much thicker and over a meter tall, and it grew later. So by removing those stems, you actually help the other ones grow quicker and taller and stronger. And the other thing is that, as I've said, I plan to take some of those suckers to plant out, but if you don't want to disturb the main root ball, the main root mass, you can use those suckers who always appear each year at some distance from the main plant. So I'm on the lookout for those, and I'm careful to not weed them by mistake. And in the autumn I will cut this root here in the ground and move that little seedling to a new location, and that would allow me to not disturb the main root of those plants and allow them to grow quicker and larger. It's starting to rain here, so I'm just showing you for a second the first hazelnuts that formed on our seedlings this year. They're still small but growing. And here as well. It's interesting that the first hazels appeared on the younger bush, but as you know, each seedling is a new variety, so it must be that that variety is much earlier fruiting than this one, which is now over a meter and 80 centimeters tall, and also has some fruit, but they're still smaller. And this plant is maybe 2 years older. So genetic diversity is something that I'm really after, and also I plan to be gathering those hazels and planting them as well, with the hope of selecting a variety which is adapted to our location and also early fruiting. Especially it will be great if it has big and delicious nuts. Okay, so I dug a shallow hole, maybe 10 centimeters deep, put some of the straw from the plastic tray at the bottom and some of the straw with mycelium in the middle, and now I'm going to cover the whole thing with a thick layer of straw and press it down, and then I'm going inside because with perfect timing it has started to rain, so it will water this experiment properly, and I will let you know what happens with it in the future.